how does a government actively trying to protect its own state-linked insurance company accidentally risk bankrupting an entire financial sector? Like, and then ultimately billing the taxpayers for the fallout.
Yeah, it is one of the most dangerous paradoxes in economics, honestly. When administrative bodies bypass market systems to, offer a helping hand, they almost always end up breaking the exact machinery they're trying to save.
Right.
It's basically systemic risk disguised as a favor.
And that tension is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We're examining a really meticulously detailed forensic report on Ghana's insurance sector.
Yeah, covering a timeline from 2012 all the way through to 2026.
Exactly. And our mission today is to explore this massive, slow-moving collision between government directives and established procurement laws. We're looking at how policies designed to support state interests are fundamentally clashing with the actual mathematical mechanics of how insurance works.
What's fascinating here is that this report completely strips away the politics of the situation.
Okay.
I mean, there are no partisan attacks or wild allegations of corruption here.
Which is refreshing.
Right. The authors make it very clear they aren't alleging direct illegality. Instead, they look strictly at the economic data and market mechanics. It's just a purely objective, systems-based assessment of market conduct.
Tracing a subtle but really powerful shift away from a competitive market toward what they call administrative allocation.
Exactly. Administrative allocation. That's the key term here.
And to you listening to us right now, even if you don't live in Ghana, and even if your daily life has absolutely nothing to do with corporate insurance, you should stick with us.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the mechanics of how well-meaning bureaucracies can accidentally engineer a systemic crisis, I mean, it is a masterclass in why systems and rules matter. It's a lesson in how bureaucracy interacts with economics literally anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it really is a universal principle. But to understand the severity of this risk, we first have to understand the environment where this is all playing out.
Right, the local context.
Ghana's insurance industry is currently in a really fascinating state. I mean, it is small, but it is booming at an incredible rate.
The numbers in the report highlight a massive greenfield opportunity.
They do. The insurance penetration in Ghana sits at just about 1% of the gross domestic product.
1%, wow.
Right. That means the vast majority of the market is completely untapped. And we're already seeing rapid capitalization on that potential. Industry profits skyrocketed from roughly 293 million Ghanaian cedi in 2020
Okay.
to over 1.2 billion cedi in 2024.
Wait, going from under 300 million to over 1.2 billion in just 4 years? I mean, that is serious exponential growth.
It is. And because of that growth, the landscape is highly fragmented and incredibly competitive. There are over 50 licensed insurers and reinsurers operating in this developing market.
Over 50? That's a lot of players fighting for that 1%.
Exactly. In a high-growth environment with low penetration, competition isn't just like a byproduct. It is the absolute lifeblood of the industry. Strict competition is how domestic capacity is built.
Right.
It's how pricing becomes efficient and how the market ultimately gains depth.
Which brings us to one of the central subjects of this report, SIC Insurance PLC.
Right? The heavyweight.
Yeah, they are a major player in this space. The report estimates they hold somewhere between 10 to 20% of the market share. So, they aren't a monopoly, but they are an undeniable force.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you just glance at their recent top-line numbers, they look like an absolute powerhouse.
Well, yeah, on the surface, the financials tell a story of sheer dominance.
Right. In 2024, SIC's revenue hit around 559.5 million cedi, and that generated a profit of about 53.4 million.
Which sounds great.
And then in 2025, it accelerated. Revenue went up to 598.5 million, and profits grew to about 69.5 million cedi.
But, and this is crucial, the forensic nature of this report requires us to look past the profit line.
Yeah.
Because when you dig into their statement of cash flows, a massive underlying stress fracture reveals itself.
Classic accounting illusion.
Exactly. Despite that impressive profit growth, SIC's operating cash flow in 2025 was actually negative. We're talking negative 28.9 million cedi.
Wow.
Yeah, their overall liquid cash position declined significantly while their on-paper profits rose.
Okay, let's unpack this, because for anyone who follows corporate finance, seeing year-over-year profit growth alongside a severely negative operating cash flow,
It's a huge red flag.
especially in the insurance sector, it's a glaring red siren. We aren't talking about like a tech startup burning venture capital to acquire users here. This is an established financial institution.
Right. It is the ultimate accounting illusion. Profit, as an accounting metric, includes what they call written premiums.
Which is just money that clients have contractually agreed to pay for coverage, right?
Exactly. It's a promise to pay.
Yeah.
But cash flow is the actual physical liquidity moving in and out of your accounts.
Mm.
If your operating cash flow is negative 28.9 million cediti, you are actively burning through your liquid reserves.
Just to keep the lights on and pay out routine claims.
Exactly.
So this is like a friend who has a massive salary on paper, but their bank account is overdrawn every single month.
Yes.
Like they look rich, but they're struggling to pay the daily bills. And in insurance, liquidity isn't just a nice to have. Liquidity is the actual product you're selling. So what is the mechanism causing that massive gap?
Well, it generally comes down to a few factors.
Yeah.
Aggressive expansion costs, unexpectedly high claims payouts, or, and this is very common with state-linked insurers, massive uncollected receivables.
Uncollected receivables, meaning people aren't paying their bills.
Right. The state or various government ministries might be signing huge insurance contracts, which immediately boosts the insurer's profit on paper.
Oh, I see where this is going.
But those same state entities are notoriously slow to actually pay the invoices.
So the insurer assumes all the liability, meaning they are legally on the hook if, say, a major ministry building burns down tomorrow.
Yes.
But they don't actually have the cash from the premium sitting in their bank account to cover it.
Precisely. You nailed it. The report concludes that while SIC's profitability is indeed improving, their underlying liquidity stress means they are fundamentally vulnerable.
They're financially stretched.
Right. They are not structurally dominant enough to justify being handed massive state portfolios without rigorous competitive underwriting. They have uneven growth and increasing risk exposure.
Which sets up the core conflict of this entire deep dive perfectly. Because the SIC has historical ties to the state. And because they are experiencing this underlying liquidity stress, the administrative state steps in to try and help.
Enter SIGA.
Right. SIGA stands for the State Interests and Governance Authority. Their mandate is to oversee and optimize state-linked entities and assets.
And in December 2025, SIGA issues a directive. They send out communication that essentially encourages all government institutions to prioritize SIC and SI Life for their insurance needs.
It's just encouraging them, right?
Well, they even establish follow-up communications to track compliance. It's framed politely as encouragement, but let's be real. When a powerful government oversight authority encourages you to use a specific vendor...
And then tracks your compliance.
Yeah, exactly. That is a mandate.
It absolutely functions as directional influence. And this is where the core tension of the forensic report just explodes into view, because SIGA's directive to funnel state business to SI fundamentally clashes with the law.
Specifically, the Public Procurement Act, Act 663, as amended by Act 914.
And the Procurement Act isn't just like a set of polite bureaucratic guidelines.
No, not at all. It's at the legal bedrock of public spending. The Procurement Act legally demands competitive tendering. It requires a strict value for money justification and equal access for qualified bidders. The law exists specifically to prevent government officials from just handing contracts to their preferred entities, regardless of intention.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If the government partly owns SIC, isn't it perfectly rational for them to just use their own company? Like, if I own a bakery, I'm not going to put out a competitive tender to buy my morning bread from the guy down the street. I'm going to eat my own bread to support my own business.
Sure.
Why shouldn't the government keep the money in-house?
So this raises an important question, and it is the exact defense often used to justify these directives.
Right.
But the fatal flaw in that bakery analogy is the ownership structure itself.
Okay, how so?
The government doesn't own the whole bakery.
Wait, really?
Yeah. According to the report, the government only owns about 40% of SIC.
40%. That's less than half.
Right. The rest of the company is owned by SSNIT, that's the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, and private institutional investors.
Private investors. Okay, that completely changes the mathematics of this directive.
Completely.
Mm.
Therefore, steering lucrative public contracts to SAC without a competitive tender isn't just an internal transfer of government funds from one state pocket to another.
No, it's a wealth transfer.
Exactly. It is actively taking public taxpayer money and using it to generate dividends for private interests. And that comes at the direct expense of all the other competing insurers in the market who were, legally entitled to bid on that contract.
Wow. And the report notes that the real-world fallout of this is already manifesting. We are seeing a noticeable shift in insurance renewals across the state sector.
Oh, yeah. Competing insurers are being systematically excluded from the process. The entire market is adjusting its behavior based on this coordinated pressure.
And that leads to the critical risks identified by the forensic analysis. When outcomes are influenced before a tender even takes place, procurement ceases to be a competition.
It becomes allocation.
Exactly. The government is no longer using the market to find the most efficient price. They are just handing out slices of the pie based on administrative preference.
Right. And they're doing it in a sector where that is uniquely dangerous.
Okay, so the market is losing its competitive edge, and contracts are just being allocated by decree. But let's look at the actual product being allocated here. Is giving one company all this government business really that dangerous? Isn't it just a matter of an insurer getting a lot of new clients?
It is profoundly dangerous.
Yeah.
And to understand why, we have to look at the strict mathematical mechanics of how insurance actually functions.
Okay, break it down for us.
Insurance is not like buying a fleet of government vehicles or, I don't know, bulk office supplies. Insurance relies entirely on the principle of dispersion.
Dispersion, like spreading the weight out.
Exactly. Multi-party participation. No single insurer in a developing market ever carries the entirety of a massive risk alone. When you insure a multi-million-dollar port facility or a national power grid,
Massive assets.
right, the primary insurer doesn't just hold that liability on their balance sheet. They chop that risk up and sell pieces of it to global reinsurers. Massive entities in places like London, Munich, or Zurich.
So they outsource the extreme risk.
Yes, the whole global system is designed to dilute risk so that no single failure collapses the chain.
So when SIGA encourages state institutions to concentrate all their various contracts into SIC?
Concentrating contracts means concentrating risk. It is a direct mathematical relationship.
That's bad.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
If you force an unnatural amount of liability onto one entity, especially an entity we already established has negative operating cash flow, you create immense capital strain.
Here's where it gets really interesting in the report, because the defenders of this centralization policy pointed to another major government action to justify their stance. They pointed to the NIDA directive of 2022.
Ah, yes. The National Information Technology Agency.
Right. In 2022, the government mandated the strict centralization of its digital and internet infrastructure across all ministries.
Right, they brought it all in-house.
And the argument from defenders of the insurance directive goes, look, if it made sense to centralize all our digital infrastructure into one agency to keep it safe, why doesn't it make sense to centralize all our insurance into one company to keep it safe? Isn't it just putting all our valuable assets into one highly guarded vault?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see exactly why the authors of the forensic report tear that comparison apart. I mean, it fails entirely on a structural, functional level.
How so? Walk us through the difference between IT and insurance.
With NIDA, the digital centralization was cabinet-approved and driven by a very real existential need for national security. A state requires sovereign control over its digital data.
Right, you don't want foreign actors snooping around.
Exactly. You want it centralized behind one massive impenetrable firewall to prevent breaches. In the world of information technology, centralizing infrastructure genuinely reduces risk.
Because it limits the points of entry for hackers.
Precisely. But insurance operates on the exact opposite physics. Centralizing insurance increases risk exponentially.
Oh, because the threat isn't someone sneaking in.
Exactly. A centralized vault in the insurance world is a disaster waiting to happen. Imagine a catastrophic event occurs. A massive fire at a major state facility combined with widespread flooding across the grid.
A worst-case scenario.
Right. If all the liability for those state assets is sitting in one single vault, held by an institution that is already struggling with negative cash flow, what happens?
The vault collapses. They literally won't have the liquidity to pay the claims.
Exactly.
It's the difference between building a solid vault for your data and needing a safety net for your finances. A safety net is made of 1,000 different threads distributed across a wide area.
Right.
If you bundle all those threads together into one thick rope, you don't have a net anymore. You just have a rope and everything falls right past it.
That captures the structural flaw perfectly. Data requires sovereign, centralized control. Insurance requires market-based, dispersed allocation to survive. And when you force concentration, there is a severe secondary danger.
Which is
the reaction of the global reinsurance market.
Right, because those global reinsurers are watching this happen.
They're constantly modeling risk.
Yeah.
If global reinsurers see that one local insurer is suddenly absorbing an unnatural concentration of the state's infrastructure risk.
And they see the negative cash flow.
Exactly. If they see that this primary insurer lacks liquidity, the reinsurers get incredibly nervous. They will either hike their reinsurance premiums aggressively to cover the concentrated risk, or they will pull their capacity entirely.
Leaving a local market dangerously exposed.
Yes.
And beyond the reinsurance strain, what happens to the everyday cost of doing business? Like, if there's no competition, why would SIC offer the government a good price?
They wouldn't. I mean, weak competition destroys price discovery. Without 5 or 6 qualified insurers fighting for the contract by offering the most efficient, mathematically sound premiums, the government ends up paying way more.
And by extension, the public.
Exactly. The public ends up paying significantly higher long-term costs for inferior coverage.
Which brings us to the pushback. Because the broader industry isn't just sitting quietly while their capacity weakens and state risk dangerously concentrates.
No, they're actively fighting it.
The report details a major recent development, a formal petition filed by IMNI Africa directly to President John Dramani Mahama.
Yeah, the IMNI petition is a pivotal moment in this timeline. It focuses squarely on procurement integrity, market distortion, and the necessity of regulatory neutrality.
They aren't messing around.
Not at all. They're formally raising the alarm at the highest executive level that administrative policy influence is shaping market outcomes entirely outside of the legal competitive process.
And what makes this so fascinating is that the forensic report highlights this isn't even the first time this exact structural clash has happened.
It is not an isolated incident. There's a very clear, documented historical precedent here.
Back in 2014, right?
Right. Back in 2014, the Ghana Insurers Association petitioned President Mahama through the National Insurance Commission over a remarkably similar issue regarding the steering of state contracts.
Oh.
And in that 2014 case, presidential intervention was required to essentially reset the board and restore competitive tendering to the market.
So this proves that we aren't just looking at a one-off bureaucratic mistake. This is a recurring structural flaw in the system. The government apparatus keeps trying to default to this administrative allocation.
It operates like a gravitational pull.
Yeah.
State institutions naturally want to consolidate power, resources, and influence.
Sure, it's human nature.
Right. And without the incredibly strict enforcement of procurement discipline, oversight bodies like SIGA can easily drift from offering high-level governance guidance into actively dictating market allocation.
The report notes that this current petition by IMNI Africa was swiftly acknowledged, elevating the issue to the national executive level once again. It's part of the official governance record now.
Which is a crucial step.
But I have to ask the ultimate so what question here.
Let's hear it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If I'm an everyday citizen in Ghana, working hard, paying my taxes, and completely unconnected to corporate finance,
Right.
why is this highly technical, bureaucratic tug of war between an oversight authority and the insurance sector my problem?
Because you, the taxpayer, are the ultimate underwriter of this entire system. Let's trace the chain reaction from start to finish.
Okay, walk us through it.
A directive is issued by an oversight body, and market distortion begins. That distortion leads to reduced competition.
Right.
Reduced competition destroys price discovery, meaning the government starts paying inflated non-competitive premiums for its state insurance.
And every CD the government spends on inflated premiums is taxpayer money. It's money that could have gone to schools or roads.
Exactly. But the chain reaction goes further. As risk concentrates dangerously into one state-linked institution, the financial vulnerability of the entire national system increases.
The rope instead of the safety net.
Right. Global reinsurers pull back. Investor confidence in the Ghanaian market drops. And if that concentrated risk turns into a catastrophic reality.
If the port facility actually burns down.
Yes. If a major sovereign claim occurs and the institution simply lacks the cash flow to pay it, who's forced to bail out the state-linked institution to prevent a total sector collapse?
The taxpayers?
The taxpayers. The immense financial burden of bailing out a strained system or simply paying inflated public premiums year after year falls squarely on the shoulders of the everyday citizen.
Man.
That is the true hidden cost of administrative allocation.
Wow. Okay. Let's take a step back and look at the massive picture we've painted today. We started with this seemingly benign idea of good intention.
Right, the desire to support local institutions.
Yeah. We've seen how a well-meaning push from an oversight authority, SIGA, designed to support a state-linked company, a company boasting high profits but silently bleeding negative cash flow,
Right.
has fundamentally collided with national procurement law.
And in doing so, it threatens to shift an entire, vibrant, high-growth industry away from a resilient competitive market into a highly dangerous state of administrative allocation.
The forensic report makes one thing incredibly clear. This analysis isn't an attack on SIC or any specific agency. It is a defense of system integrity.
Absolutely.
I want to pass it over to you for the final word from the report itself because I think the authors distilled this entire deep dive perfectly.
Yeah, they conclude with this definitive statement. A competitive insurance system distributes risk and allocates contracts through process. Any shift toward concentration without legal grounding introduces both financial risk and procurement distortion.
It is such a powerful reminder that in economics, the rules aren't just red tape meant to slow things down. They are the load-bearing walls of the entire financial structure.
Beautifully said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We covered a lot of complex ground today, from the illusion of operating cash flow and procurement law to the strict physics of risk concentration.
It was a big one.
But before you go, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over.
Please do.
Think back to the analogy of the safety net made of 1,000 individual threads and how bundling them together destroys their ability to catch you. If bureaucratic oversight and good intentions can so quietly and easily distort the fundamental mechanics of an entire national insurance market, what other vital sectors in our economies right now are silently buckling under the weight of helpful government intervention? Take care, everyone. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.